Are we live? We are live. Are you live? Are you alive? Are you lit? Are you turnt? What?
I'm running I'm quarterbacking here. I'm being young Jamie, and my processor takes like an extra 5 seconds after the intro. So
Gotcha. No, I feel you.
yeah, it's
You're multitasking. Got a lot going on there. I understand.
Hey, Matt McDermott's live and alive in the chat.
Barely. Yeah.
Shout out. Yeah.
Matt almost died recently, so glad to see you back, Matt. Very glad. So there is now, this show now has a nickname. I've mentioned this before, but it's Weimer time.
Weim time.
Some people say Weim time. That's wrong. Yeah. That's just it's Weimer time. Use the full first last name. I mean, if you want to be really based and really kind of also follow on the vibe of this show, say Weimer time, and then you'll get a much better sense of what we're about here.
I'm sorry. Is there something inherently wrong with Germans? Is there something?
It's really wild. This is true. I don't know if you don't know this, and people who haven't been around like leftists, liberals, like intimately much of their lives. Again, this is me. Like, I'm a double agent. I can spill the beans on who these people are. No, really, that one of the tenets or instincts or emotional impulses that left liberals and many leftists have is that Germans as a people, as a culture, as an ethnicity it's racist. It's amazing that they're biologically predisposed to authoritarianism, totalitarianism, fascism, etc., and therefore should be kept in perpetual sort of servitude to the United States, I guess, which is of course the enlightened republic that knows better. No, it's a real thing. Go ask most left liberals. They have that belief about Germans. It's amazing. The racism, which is not a new thing, by the way. I mean, there has been anti-German racism, when it's been necessary for certain wars to be fought. That's been a part of American history, but it continues on amazingly in the minds of our most egalitarian, most anti-racist people, the left.
Yeah, again, it's obvious to anybody observing American politics that racism isn't real, except for it's in how it operates with liberals. Like, it's
they're so racist. They are like radically, militantly, aggressively, minute by minute racist. I even have a very recent example. I'm not sure I can tell it because it might.
Well, I've yet to find a white person as racist as a Spike Lee villain in real life or history ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the Hoteps, who are, love them to pieces. They're not right about everything, but the things they are right about, they are devastatingly correct. So one of the things that the Hoteps have said is that by their own reckoning, this is two black guys from the East Coast, by their own reckoning, white people in America are the least racist people on earth. That white Americans, us, are the least racist people on earth currently, and historically, that there is no group of people in human history who have been less racist than white Americans now. I mean, and that, if you know anything about the rest of the world, if you know anything about history, if you know anything about being an American and about real race relations in America compared to, again, any other country, it's indisputable. It's indisputable. Yes, and in fact, I mean, anti-racism, non-racism, there's been various versions of anti-racism in this country dating back to the abolitionist period in the 1830s and 40s. Ever since then, there have been multiple movements, intellectual and cultural movements and political movements against racism that have taken various forms. Some have been forced integration. Some have been just sort of intellectual moves against the idea of different biological races of human beings, against the idea of there being some hierarchy, some essential hierarchy among the races. But this has been the seat of that movement. Yes, abolitionism began in Britain, but it was almost immediately taken up by American abolitionists too, back in the 1820s and 1830s. And it became a much larger, more powerful global movement. Abolitionism then became the sort of anti-racist movement that we know today. That's the lineage, by the way, of BLM, and their rhetoric goes back to the abolitionist movement all the way back to the 1820s. But this America and much of the anti-racism, though, also had its problems, as we well know, right? And so when I said that about BLM being the descendant of the abolitionists, I meant mostly for the worst, because what the abolitionists did was end up essentializing races, even though they tried not to. And they created this whole system of patriarchy and paternalism toward blacks, where white, elite, educated progressives like the abolitionists would take care of, would educate, would school, would nurture, would elevate, would uplift the blacks and make them into full American citizens, meaning just like us, just like New England Puritan Yankees, school teachers who were the ones who did a lot of the abolitionist work before and after the Civil War in the South by literally educating black kids in schools and trying to teach them, train them, cajole them into becoming, and this is the way they talked about it, just like whites. So, but there was an underlying assumption, which was foundationally anti-racist, which was that these people can be uplifted and changed. Actual racists believe that blacks could never be like us, so leave them alone or get rid of them. This has been, to this day, the global seat of anti-racism.
Mm-hmm. They'll call you a racist for bringing this up, but the other statistics that are forbidden, besides FBI crime statistics, are the statistics of how races self-report their opinions of other races and their own race. And white people have the least amount, statistically, according to polling data, of in-group preference. If you ask them,
white Americans.
White Americans, yeah. Yep. I mean, probably white. I mean, modern white Europeans. I haven't seen that data, but Western white Europeans, I'm sure. But
yep. No,
rate the races on highly preferable to not.
And then the other thing the Hoteps have said many, many times, and it's just indisputable, if you've ever spent 5 seconds around black culture, black sort of working class culture, is that the most racist people in America are black people. Like, no doubt about it. I mean, racist against each other. There's colorism, which is a massive issue among black people, right? There's a whole hierarchy among them where it's commonly believed that those who are of darker skin are inferior and less beautiful, etc. And then the racism, I mean, certainly in the black neighborhoods, including several that I have lived in various different cities, against Asians who own the stores in the hoods, is grotesque. I mean, and we know this from the 92 riots in LA, because what did that end up becoming? It ended up becoming an armed civil war between Korean shop owners in South Central and the black people who lived around them. So the racism, and then of course, anti-white racism, among Black people, and I'm talking generally, but I would just say what we call Black working class culture in academia. I mean, listen to hip hop. Listen to hip hop. I mean, and listen to almost any hip hop song of the last 30 years. There will be something racist in it, not just the sexism that we focus on, but there's always references to this N-word, that, and that white be that. And I mean, and then whole skits about Koreans and Japanese and Chinese people.
Yeah. As a white person growing up in middle America, that I was, I should be racist according to white liberal understanding of middle America. But I was only exposed to racism through Black popular culture, through hip hop and through Dave Chappelle. When the Chappelle show hit, the playgrounds were running wild with racial jokes. And we didn't understand them at all. These stereotypes were introduced to us, and it was a way to be cool, and it was a way to be like Black people who had this amazing, hilarious understanding of race that made them cooler than us. So
this is why MAGA and the alt-right generally need to understand their N-word roots. That, you know what I mean? Like there's a tricksterism, there's a rebelliousness, an ironic rebelliousness, right, in race jokes that we used to make all the time that you're referring to, and the alt-right trolls on Twitter who make similar kinds of provocative race jokes, and MAGA generally, who now are feeling much more liberated to say things about Black people. No, there is you could also call it adolescent, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm also not opposed to being adolescent, but it is sort of a childish way of provoking the elites. And I think that can be very useful at times. And I think that's what a lot of MAGA is. And because the elites have held, their racial ideas so closely and so dearly for so long. I mean, these are their most precious children, their ideas about Black people. To come along and poke at those is, in a sense, the most subversive thing one can do in the context of modern American liberal culture, which is what the thing that we all live within. But that goes back to, I think there is a connection to, and I mean like a familial, almost genetic connection culturally to the older comedians that you're talking about, who are mostly Black, who are the ones they were. I mean, the very first comedians, I think this is right, to talk explicitly about race and to make jokes about other races and about one's own race were Black comedians. I think Richard Pryor probably was the first. Red Fox before him in the 1960s, but there were others. And that became a staple of Black comedy for decades. It still is. If you watch Black comedians, Cat Williams, all the most popular Black comedians today, making fun of different races, and in particular, the Black race, right? They spend most of their time making fun of Black people as a race. They talk about it in racial terms, but always lightly, ironically, not in the way that sort of a scientific racist of the 19th century talked about Blacks. But nonetheless, it's kind of like you and I have talked about it in many times, which is that racial discourse in America kind of hardened in the last 10 to 20 years, where, me growing up in the 70s and 80s and 90s, as you know, racial jokes were common, accepted, sort of a standard, not just for Black comedians, but for many others as well. And then with the rise of political correctness in the 90s, and especially what we call wokeness in the 2010s, that just shut down. And we've lost, and which also has connections to the minstrel tradition, going all the way back to the 19th century, of whites imitating Blacks out of envy and admiration, but it also being very confusing because there was a lot of sort of making fun of Blacks simultaneously. So it's a very interesting connection dynamic there. But that was delicious and amazing and fun as well, and illuminating and not scary or racist in the way the Ku Klux Klan was, or the way that the Nazis were, or it was still a cohabitational irony. We are going to live together in this country, and it's pretty damn funny that we got all these Black people from Africa living with all these white people descended from Europeans, and some of us were slaves, and some of us were slave owners, and here we are, and now we all have the same rights as American citizens, and it's kind of ironic because we carry forward all these very, very different cultures while being American. It's funny. I mean, Black culture, again, Black working class culture of predominantly Black neighborhoods, that's what I mean, is radically, fundamentally different than other cultures of Americans. I mean, it's just is. There have been books written on this called Two Different Nations, things like that. Two Separate Nations. Andrew Hacker was a famous book in the 2000s, I think, saying something exactly like that, that Blacks and whites in America live in two separate worlds, but including culturally, they're just fundamentally different. Anyway, so there you go. It's Weim time. It's Weimer time.
Well, it's important to note that comedians nowadays, racial comedians, for the most part, are stealing jokes from Twitter. They're copying white or whatever race these anonymous posters are, but they're stealing their material from anonymous posters now. And like now, actual funny jokes are okay to be on the market again. And they have to go back to the anonymous posters that were doing it for the love and getting banned. And people like Owen Benjamin, huge comedians have stolen Owen Benjamin's material from the years that he's been banned. And they're stealing Sam Hyde's material now, but those underground anonymous posters and persecuted comedians that basically did comedy while it was illegal 5 years ago are being stolen by your Netflix special having comedians, by your Daily Show comedians.
I love how you said actually funny comedy, meaning racist comedy.
Sure. I mean, whatever you want to call it. Like,
oh, it's Weimar time now. You got to pronounce it that way now.
Yeah. I mean, no, but sure. If you want to go back to comedy specials where no jokes are actually made and the audience is just lectured at, and people relive their trauma experiences and relive their therapy sessions that was winning awards 5 years ago, fine. But if you want people making fun of each other, yeah.
I mean, everyone should go immediately right now, go watch what I consider to be the Bible, which is Richard Pryor's Live in Concert 1979 concert film. I think it's on YouTube somewhere. You can find it. If you need to pay for it, do it and watch it. Right now, it's the greatest live comedy performance in human history. And it is thoroughly, technically racist from top to bottom, from beginning to end, but in this kind of way. He spends much of that show making fun of Black people as Black people, talking about Black people in an essentialist way, as if, Black people do this and Black people as a collective, undifferentiated racial group. And then he does the same thing with whites, and he does this incredible impersonations of white people using a sort of stereotypical white accent, which of course for him represents repression, stiffness, uptightness, Puritanism. It's amazing. What's the line? Dear, will we have sexual intercourse tonight? He's imitating like a married white couple and how they deal with each other. And, he's not wrong, fundamentally, is the point. Whiteness is a real thing, and it's been shackles on my people and your people for centuries. And you as an Afro-Cuban percussionist and me as just a Black guy, we are now finally liberating our people from the shackles of whiteness. So thank you. Okay. What? No, this is getting weird. We should talk about the news.
Okay.
No, everything I said was true. And I believe in my soul. Whiteness is a real thing, and it's based on puritanical repression coming from New England culture, the founders, the Pilgrims, the Puritans. Yes.
Such horrible repression, like showing up to places on time or
but
being
it
quiet
also
during
gets
the
things
movie,
done. It also gets things done. So, all the bridges, the beautiful bridges, which are now sort of falling down, but they built them, and the freeways and the roads and the railroads and steamships and the space shuttle and all of it is also a product of whiteness, of repression, of self-discipline, of self-imposed order, the Protestant good stuff. Yeah, that too you get from it. So it's like white people, like, thank you for, all the buildings and stuff and the internet and
air conditioning
and really. And I love white people so much. I mean that for all those things. Imagine what it was like to live without white people's products.
You know what?
But it also means like we don't know how to dance. We don't know how to dance because we've been so busy rationalizing the world, reducing the world to ones and zeros, binary black and white schema, and then attempting to conquer it. We don't know how to dance, and it's a real thing.
We should organize a protest where all the white people just stop working for a day, and we'll see if our presence is missed.
No, that should be on Friday. Do you know about the boycott on Friday?
What's
on
the boycott
28th?
On Friday?
Oh, it'll go perfectly. It's it's Al Sharpton is calling for a national all black people. This is Al Sharpton's thing. On the 28th, this Friday, all black people will not buy anything for 24 hours in protest of the anti-DEI initiatives.
Okay, so that's
that's going to go with white people stopping
working. Yeah.
I mean, if that's not a recipe for economic collapse, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of, Al Sharpton's whole point is that like most of the American economy is like white people producing stuff and black people consuming it.
Well, you heard it here first, guys. Sell your Nike stock now.
No, that's not me. That's Al Sharpton, and not just him, but like many. No, it is many, and then like I've watched many black clergy and political leaders around the country saying exactly this. They say this. They'll admonish their audiences to say, "We are the 12th or 13th largest consumer bloc in the world. Like black Americans apparently have more consumer power than most other nations, but we don't know that all we do is buy things that the white man has produced." And so on Friday, February 28th, to protest the attacks on affirmative action, we will not buy anything for 24 hours, which will show the man our power as consumers, which, okay, I get. No, the argument is, and it's this pathetic. And then Nina Turner, also this sort of perennial lefty or Ohio. Is she in Congress now? She was in Congress. I don't know. This thing about how like the cuts to the federal workforce is affecting primarily black people because, and she cites the number, if it's some staggering number, which I knew before this, but like, some staggering number of the black middle class, basically black people with money, work for the federal government.
I saw
it's more than half.
Statistic that couldn't be true. I saw a statistic saying 65% of college-educated black women, but that can't be true. I didn't see a sort, but is it really something like that?
I mean, so I don't know, but I promise you that the black middle class, meaning those who don't live in public housing, who pay their own rent and they pay their own mortgage, and that middle class and above, that it is more than half. I promise you, more than half work for the federal government. They have a federal government job. I mean, here's an anecdote for whatever it's worth. I gave a seminar at this black senior citizen center in Queens, New York, back in the 2000s about World War II and stuff. But it was at this black senior center in Queens. It's like 100% black. And it was all guys in their 70s who were actually veterans of World War II, black veterans. And I think it was 22 black men, New York City, 2010s. And I shit you not, every single one of them worked for the post office. And lived in a house, right? They lived in their own house and had for decades. And it's a huge thing. Nina Turner, people can look it up. I mean, it's available evidence. And amazingly, some black political leaders like Nina Turner have seen this as sort of like evidence that we should support federal employment in generally, that we should not cut federal jobs because Black people depend on it. I mean, this is where this culture of paternalism, which I talked about, which began not with Black people, don't blame them for this, for originating it. As I said, it began with the abolitionists all the way back. We're going to save you and emancipate you from slavery, and then we're going to teach you in our own schools how to be Americans, how to be just like us, because we're better, of course. And it continued all the way through World War II, and since then, we're going to treat you like special children who need special advantages, special benefits, privileges, and dispensations. And we are the ones who are going to give those to you because you need to be brought into our world. You need to learn how to do ballet and opera, right? There's always these panics about how there aren't enough Black people in these white institutions, as if Black people want to be ballet dancers. But it's a paternalism that among elements of the Black political class, not most Black people, but the Black political class, has been internalized. So that many people in the Black middle class, professional class, political class believe that they're going to die without white people taking care of them and giving them jobs in the federal government, etc. They're going to die without DEI, without these programs to give them jobs over whites, that they cannot survive without this. It's an incredible infantilization that's been internalized over not decades now, but now it's 2 centuries, beginning with the advent of racial paternalism, white liberalism before the Civil War. Thank God nowadays we do have many Black people in this country who are politically aware to some extent, like the Hoteps, perfect example, who see right through this immediately and want to be men or women, adults, human beings before they are Black. And they don't feel like they need to prove it. They don't want to have to prove it. They find the entire liberal project going back 2 centuries to be disgusting because it says to them that you are not adult human beings. You are children who need to be taken care of by white people. It's the most racist inversion that one could imagine, and yet it's almost never challenged. So now the alt-right comes along and challenges it by saying, oh no, Black people really are biologically inferior. And the old racism that the liberalism squelched is correct. And it's just, we don't have to do that either, guys. We can just be agnostic about race and make fun of it, because there are certainly different cultures that have been attached to or associated with various putative alleged races. Jews are funny and smart. Blacks can dance and are funny, and are great athletes and whatever. It goes on and on. I mean, white people are really uptight about sex and about dancing, etc. Whatever, it goes on, right? That's the discourse about race that I grew up with in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And that was the time of, I would say, more voluntary racial integration than any time in American history. Go to a disco club in 1970 anything or 1980 anything, or a hip hop show, many of which I went to at that time. The most integrated public spaces you'll ever see, but entirely voluntary. There was no government forcing people onto buses to go to particular neighborhoods and particular schools and particular cities to integrate. There was no university having quotas attached to races and trying to achieve some particular racial balance. None of that. It was simply people wanting to go dance and drink and fuck and have fun. And a lot of the culture was Black and some of the culture was white, and it was attractive. And people hooked up and there were interracial babies made and all the rest of it. But it was voluntary racial integration, which is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and is the only kind of integration we should ever want. It's the kind of you're dealing with, right, as an Afro-Cuban percussionist. Yeah. And so there you go. Amen. to my own words.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about racism in regards to Russiagate? The eternal
Jesus, yes. The original N-word, Russians.
Yeah.
They're the OG N-word.
Much like the anti-German prejudice that you were talking about at the beginning of the show, there is a deep anti-Russian prejudice and bias. We've talked about this. Well, you've had several interviews about this particular topic in relation to the Ukraine war, but it's the intellectual basis pretty much for all of the Democrats' opposition to Trump in regards to Russiagate and Putin and all that. Yeah,
it's amazing. I was who was this? Just a day or two ago, somebody, one of these liberal Democrats, like bemoaning Trump, abandoning Ukraine and being pro-Russia. And in this case, as in almost every other case, he appealed to sort of this idea of this Russian essence.
Well, the thesis is that
it's not even a thesis. It's just an claim. Yeah, go ahead.
Putin is Stalin. And the problem with Stalin wasn't that he was a communist. The problem with Stalin is that he was a Russian. And all Russians are just murderous by nature. They are murderous conquerors, brutal savages by nature.
Yeah.
And talk to your most liberal cosmopolitan friend. Ask them how they were feeling when they first went on vacation after the pandemic. And they were in the hotel lobby and they saw some Russians there. What was their attitude towards the Russians in the hotel lobby on their first international trip following the pandemic? And you'll see nothing but pure racial hatred. And it is being reignited as Donald Trump makes progress on ending the Ukraine war. And the establishment clings to backing Zelensky because Putin is Stalin and Stalin is Russian.
So everyone should either buy Glenn Deason's book called Russophobia or watch my interview with Glenn Deason on Unregistered about a year ago, because that book is the one that tells the history of this utterly irrational and fundamentally racist, it becomes a racist set of ideas in the West, in America, the UK, even France and Germany to some extent, but certainly in America and the UK, against Russia, that these racist ideas against Russia, that they are sort of an eternal threat, that the Russian character, the Russian personality, sort of biologically, if you're born as a Russian, you will want to conquer the world and do so in particularly brutal ways, apparently. This is how they talk about Putin. This is how they talk. Because why is Putin an imperialist? They don't offer any evidence because there is no evidence, because Putin has never said a damn thing to suggest that he wants to be an imperialist in Europe. And there's also the fact that Russia, certainly now, but for decades, has been utterly incapable of being an empire, of conquering parts of Europe and then colonizing them and governing them in perpetuity. Do you think Russia is capable of doing? Clearly not. But the main point is that Putin has never said a damn thing. Not a damn thing. Neither has Medvedev. Neither has Alexander Dugin. Also, I recommend everybody watch his interview with me on Unregistered about 2 years ago. Also, he was just interviewed by Glenn Greenwald, and I think that interview is coming out soon.
Yeah, but even Alex Jones earlier this week.
Right. But even Dugin, who is to the right of Putin, and by the way, had no influence over Putin. I mean, Dugin said to me, he said something like, well, that gentleman, Mr. Putin, as if he had no relationship with him. And I think it's true. And various sources, Mark Sloboda, also people check out Mark Sloboda on YouTube, phenomenal analyst of Russian affairs, an American who's an expat who lives in Russia and who's a straight up partisan in many ways of the Putin government and even of the the special military operation in Ukraine, but nonetheless will tell you and show you that almost all of the propaganda about Putin and Russia is farcical. My point is that even the right wing in Russia is not interested in conquering Poland or invading Germany or seizing anything except places where NATO has placed missile batteries and army brigades and regiments and tank fleets. NATO has something like 1,500 battle zone tanks ready along the Russian border right now. And an incredible, this is an amazing number. I think I said this last week, 900,000 armored vehicles. And then rocket launchers and artillery pieces and hundreds of thousands of troops from all over the NATO world, all assembled right on the border with Russia. But no, they're being paranoid because NATO is just a defensive force, guys. It's just a defensive force.
We didn't talk about this last week. We didn't get to it, but what did you think of Keir Starmer saying he's going to put UK troops to make up for the slack of the United States leaving, and that he's committed to continuing this effort by any means necessary, that it would be a peacekeeping force, but by any analysis, it's comical that the UK has any resources to defend the Ukrainian border.
How many tanks do they have left? I think I said this a few weeks ago. I mean, they gave all their tanks away to Ukraine, and they have, I think I heard they only have 70,000 active duty service members in the UK military, something like that. I mean, they can't do a damn thing. So this is a really interesting question that I've actually been thinking about and sort of looking at recently, which is this attitude among European elites and governments toward Russia, which certainly since 2022 has been uniformly hysterical and apocalyptic, right? Every European government leader, since, with the exception of Orban, since 2022 certainly has said that Putin is Hitler. He's going to conquer all of Europe if we don't stop him. We must arm Ukraine forever until the last Ukrainian is dead. Right? Just hardcore, fanatical enemies of Russia, wanting to kill as many Russian soldiers as possible. Many of the members of the EU and NATO have said this over many times. It's based on mostly, I'd say almost entirely, as I said, this whole system of mythology about Putin and about the Russian character and about what Russia really intends, and mostly about Putin, this demonology of Putin that is, if you spend a minute and go to Glenn Deason's book again, Russophobia, and you can look through all the cases of the alleged assassinations of journalists and Putin opponents by Putin, you'll see right away that maybe he did assassinate somebody or try to assassinate somebody, but in every single case that we know about, it is at least skeptical. It is at least dubious. And in many of the cases, it's quite clear that it was either MI6 or the CIA framing Putin for allegedly poisoning some journalists. Look at the Skripals. Please, everybody go look at that case. I mean, this is the one they all talk about all the time. Navalny, we know there's video of him working with MI6 to subvert the Russian government inside Russia. That's why he got put in prison. I mean, again, I'm an anti-statist. I'm not for this, but of course that's what's going to happen. The Skripals it was an MI6 operation, clearly. They were not poisoned by Russian agents. It was all a setup, all a hoax, all a fraud. Every single media outlet that was shut down in Russia, every single political dissident that was put in prison in Russia that I know about, every single one of them was working directly with enemies of the Russian state, the United States and the United Kingdom. They were working directly with MI6, CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, USAID. They were foreign subversive agents working inside Russia to overthrow the Russian government. This is why they got put in the gulag. I'm not for the gulag. I'm not for Putin. I'm not for any of this stuff. But if one government's going to try to subvert another one in this way by sending covert underground operatives inside that other inside that other country, what else do you expect to happen? Just like if you put your military alliance with thousands of tanks and hundreds of thousands of armored vehicles and many hundreds of thousands of soldiers right up on the border of this adversary country, what exactly do you think they're going to do in response to that? If China had an alliance, a military alliance with Mexico, and imagine 900,000 Chinese armored vehicles on the border in Mexico of the United States. Imagine 2,000 Chinese tanks on the border of the United States in Mexico. We would nuke the place, guys. Why do we have to explain this?
There's the mineral deal. Well,
yeah,
you brought up Alexander. Yeah. And it's unique in that Trump is proposing that American citizens get a kickback for their involvement in the Ukraine war, or that U.S. citizens benefit materially from our colonial project in nation building in Ukraine, which is essentially what happened. So what is it, like 50% of all future revenue from mineral resources are going to go to a fund, and then half of that goes to Ukraine rebuilding, and then half of that goes back to repaying Americans or repaying the United States government in response to all the aid that was given. This is sort of in line with the Donald Trump, why don't we just take the oil proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of refreshing that we have just transparent colonialism or transparent projects in the American material interest for the first time, as opposed to perpetual nation building with no clear directive or goal or agenda behind it.
This is epic and immense and probably historically pivotal, what you're pointing to. So let me try to explain just how big this is. And you will know this, again, if you take our Save Your Nation course at the Academy, which we just finished. But no, this is the story in that Save Your Nation course. Since before the founding of America, it has been envisioned by the founding fathers, by Abraham Lincoln, by all the presidents and all the major senators for 200 years as the next global empire, the next Rome, that would remake the whole world in our image and thereby uplift it and make it virtuous and godly. And this is the way that every president and senator spoke. It was an ideological empire. And in fact, they disdained the idea of just extracting resources like some colonial empires have done and then walking away. They really were Christian, evangelical in their mission. They wanted the United States to be economically powerful, so they certainly wanted the oil from the Middle East, and they wanted the rubber from Vietnam, and they wanted the gold and the diamonds from South Africa and all the rest of it, sure, but that was in service of being able to colonize the world and uplift and Christianize and Americanize it. It was ideological. It was a Christian evangelical ideological mission from before the American Revolution all the way up until maybe right about now. Because what maybe is happening right now, at least Trump wants to do this, we now have the very first president who was not part of that project. He never thought that way. He was never trained that way. He has never thought that way. He has always thought about the world in transactional terms. Transactional economic terms, non-ideological terms. Donald Trump, I think we can say this, he's pretty chaotic and inconsistent in his thinking generally, but on this, I think he is pretty consistent. In terms of international relations, he is not, he's not a Wilsonian. He's not interested in remaking the world in our image. He's not interested in colonizing the Philippines over here and making them into Americans. And, he's not interested in colonizing Western Europe as was done after World War II and making them pro-American. He's not interested in the imperial project in any way, disdains it. But what he is clearly interested in, and this is, goes back to his comment about Iraq, like his beef about Iraq was, we did this whole war and we didn't even get the oil out of it. We could be looking at the beginning of, maybe that if Trump gets his way, the transformation of the American empire from an ideological project into a purely economic, extractive, exploitative project.
It's pretty obvious that Bush was a Wilsonian.
Yeah.
And that Mike Pompeo sort of followed in that tradition a little bit. Like he had a view of American exceptionalism that was in line with that vision.
Yep.
But the Obama-Biden foreign policy seemed to be entirely cynical, nonsensical, and done with the explicit goal of draining taxpayer resources, draining the United States for the purpose of the war itself, like perpetual war for the sake of reappropriating funds to the benefaction. So for the benefaction of the military industrial complex, USAID projects, allies. It just seemed like a cynical transferring of wealth to political allies.
Yeah.
Very little ideology behind it. Beyond,
yes.
Yeah.
So Daniel Bessner, and I recommend his channel too. It's what's it called on YouTube? Anyway, Danny Bessner, he has a great podcast on YouTube with a partner whose name I'm forgetting too. But anyway, he was on my show. He's been on my show a couple of times, sort of recently. And he's written about this and he's done a lot of talking about this, but he argues that the American empire is no longer an ideological project. That the reason we now continue to have 500 to 800 military bases all over the world in more than half of the world's countries, by the way, it's about 2/3, by the way, maybe 3/4 of the world's countries. The United States has a military base right now. But we're not an empire. His argument is that, the support for NATO, the support for Ukraine, the support for Israel, all these really expensive, costly, clearly just imperialist measures that the United States has taken recently are not for ideological reasons anymore. I think he admits or acknowledges that most American foreign policy until recent times has been ideological. I think he agrees with me on that. The idea of American being the exceptional nation that was commanded by God, literally this is how they thought and talked, commanded by God to uplift the world. Dan Bessner argues that no, now it is simply kind of a zombie empire, and the makers of foreign policy, at least before Trump, the current Trump administration, were motivated simply by a desire to extend their power and extend the power of the U.S. federal government, which they depended on. I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, does Jake Sullivan really care about making Iraqis into democratic liberal citizens? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, does Tony Blinken really care in his heart about making Russians into good Americans? I don't know. I don't know what's motivating these people. It's unclear. But I do know that the MAGA crowd, JD Vance, Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, etc., except for Israel, are really not into the American empire. They're really not into it. And when MAGA finds out that Tel Aviv is full of gay nightclubs,
well,
and sodomy all over the place, then Israel is going to go down too, and we will no longer have an American empire. And I mean that, by the way. I realized that. I think I was even half asleep in the middle of the night when this came to me. I said, when MAGA finds out how queer Israeli culture is, we will then end our aid to Israel, which will eliminate the entire empire. America first will truly reign once MAGA, the MAGA base, finds out that Israel's full of fags.
Yeah, homophobia is the only force that has the capacity to save the world at this point.
I mean, and it's actually, I mean, that's real. Like, yeah. I really mean that. I think that's actually the only thing that will save the Palestinians is when MAGA finds out how gay Israel is. They will then put pressure on Trump to end all this nonsense, like his Trump Gaza video, and the U.S. will be forced to end its aid to Israel. I think, because I now know this is the way that most Americans think about politics. They think about it through often, interestingly, sexual terms like this. So the right wing is, of course, obsessed with
culture war.
Yeah, but I mean, the right wing is particularly obsessed with sexual deviance, right? And so again, when they get one glimpse of the Tel Aviv nightlife, which by all accounts is just the queerest thing in the world, really, we could be facing a new moment in the history of Zionism where the jig is up.
Okay. That might come sooner rather than later. I think I...
Oh, really?
Yeah. I slightly disagree with you on the right, but...
What about?
Well, I think there's a large constituent of Republicans. Now, this might be some who are, by all means, liberals who just are pro-establishment liberals. They just believe that the Republican Party is a more respectable party, more efficient party, is better at doing the things that the Democratic Party wants to do without corruption. Like I always say this, Glenn Beck worships Martin Luther King. Like his march to restore honor or whatever on Washington 15 years ago, that was like synchronized with Martin Luther King's anniversary of his talk on Washington. It's hard to find a Republican who is red-pilled on Martin Luther King Jr. and who is red-pilled on civil rights legislation. I think that's the fulcrum for everything, is somebody who sees the truth about civil rights legislation. Because I think there are plenty of Republicans who, the vast majority of Republicans, have no actual prejudice against races or sexual orientations. It's very, very hard, even among church-going, like Republican voters, to find polling data that shows like strict disapproval of gay marriage, for example. I think that is a working class attitude, and it is one of and it is one of indifference to the norms of the ruling class. But it's definitely a vocal dissident attitude. But I think the facts on the ground are most people were educated in a public school, and they think Martin Luther King Jr. is a hero, and they think that civil rights are progress. So,
Wait, what are you saying about the Civil Rights Act, for instance?
Yeah.
Go, be based. Go do it. Be based.
It's probably the number one thing that needs to be repealed if our government is going to function, if our society is going to function at all.
Damn.
Yeah.
So you're going full Rand Paul here. because that's what he got busted
Ron
for.
Paul,
Right?
Rand Paul, all
no, but yeah, when Rand, I think when he was running for Senate, right? This is what they busted him with. Some media interview, they said, "Well, what about the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Do you not support that?" And he said, "No, the government should not be forcing people to
all
decide."
All this anti-DEI talk might get Republicans to re-examine civil rights legislation because our victories are happening so fast. And the same reason you get rid of DEI legislation is the same reason you get rid of civil rights legislation. It forces people to favor certain races. It forces people to do things that they wouldn't naturally want to do. It forces businesses to behave unnaturally. It disrupts the free market. It's the number, and it allows the federal government to basically do literally anything to justify any intervention under the guise that somebody isn't being treated fairly.
If the spirit of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 were dominant and universal among Americans, if we all were trained and internalized to think about race the way that the Civil Rights Act tells us to think about it, meaning that we should never discriminate against people in any way based on ideas of race, there would have been no Richard Pryor. There would have been no black comedy. There would have been no funny comedy. There would have been a homogeneous culture, ironically dictated and determined by who? White elites trained in Ivy League universities. Those are the ones who have run the government. Those are the ones who've come up with these plans to eliminate racism from our system. It's always been about assimilationism into their own culture. Their own culture. America has been hijacked for about 200 years by a Northeastern and somewhat West Coast, highly educated elite who have attempted to impose their own culture on the rest of us. And by the way, my brother, this goes for the rise of MAGA too. This, I think, accounts for the rise of MAGA, that many, many people, tens of millions of people in America felt rightly discriminated against, mocked, abused, denigrated, looked down upon, disregarded politically, and they got their revenge. There were attempts by massive, ongoing, systemic attempts by the liberal establishment through my entire lifetime to assimilate all Americans, not my entire lifetime, since the Civil War, to assimilate all Americans into their culture, the culture of people who drink lattes.
Well, this is why I don't think racism is real at all. Like, I think what a lot of people call racism are genuine cultural differences and genuine historical grievances between ethnicities and races. And people have genuine reasons to not want to associate with each other. And if people don't want to associate with each other, if you force people who don't want to be together, they're going to foster actual hatred as opposed to indifference or, a mild prejudice. If you want actual hostility and hatred, you put an ant and a spider in a glass jar and you shake the jar. But to your earlier point on Trump or the right wing realizing how much Israel is like Sodom and Gomorrah. The AI video you were talking about that Trump released on Truth Social, if you pay close attention to that, I'm going to play it real quick, but if you pay close attention to that, I think a lot of people on Truth Social were looking at this and seeing that this is a bizarre, hedonistic, weird vision,
right,
to impose on the Holy Land, like to impose on the ancient Christian Holy Land.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not a Christian, guys. Are you not getting this? He's not a Christian. He's so not.
Tunnels coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new light. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza #1.
So as my friend Heidi Matthews said on Twitter, why is Elon Musk eating so much dip? Number one. No, it's phenomenal. Of course, you know, everyone on the left and almost everyone in the pro-Palestine, whatever you call it, solidarity movement, you know, has been hysterical about it. I'm not. I mean, I'm amazed by it. I'm stunned by it. I am yet again impressed by Trump's. God, what is it? Anarchism?
Yeah, sure. Anarchic indifference.
Trump,
to,
you know,
yeah.
Listen, guys, listen, everybody. Like, this is maybe what hasn't been said about Trump. He's our first anarchist president because he clearly has major moments, at least, where he doesn't care about the rules, about the laws, about the norms, about general rules of comportment. I mean, this is what liberals have been focused on mostly since 2015 about him, right? It's that he says mean things and his skin is too orange and his hair is weird and he covers himself in gold. He's not bourgeois and orderly like us. But man, he really thinks maybe he just got a deal done. This is real. Listen. Maybe that video came out just now because he just made a deal behind closed doors, which he's been working on for weeks now, months now, with Saudi Arabia, with the UAE, with Bahrain, whoever, the Gulf kingdoms that are aligned with him and with the United States to fork over enough money. We talked about this last week, to fork over enough money to pay every single resident of Gaza, all 2 million of them, enough money to bribe them to leave voluntarily. And also pay for housing in places around the world for Palestinians to live in, to bribe them. I've been saying this for weeks now. I'm quite sure that's what's going on behind closed doors, behind the scenes. And I think that's maybe why he released that or posted that video, because he probably thinks it's going to happen. I want to know what the dollar amount is. We talked about this again last week, 2 weeks ago. What's the dollar amount for the average Palestinian living in Gaza to leave Gaza, which, you know, again, me, modern, cosmopolitan, secular, rootless, you know, cosmopolitan. I mean, I don't give a shit. I just want to like live well, and I can live well in many places. I don't have any kind of blood and soil attachment to any place on earth, but they do, or at least many of them do, quite clearly and famously they do, and are willing to put up with everything imaginable, clearly, famously, to stay there. I mean, again, I would have been gone a long time ago if I were born in Gaza, but I wasn't born into that culture. So I think that he's working on this. I think he's amassing some huge fund. This is my prediction right now, but it just comports with everything he said. Right now, there is some fund being put together with donations from the Saudi Kingdom, the United Arab Emirates, the Bahrain Kingdom, the other Gulf states. I don't know. Well, Qatar for sure. They have so much money that they can do it. And by the way, another reason I think this is that the is it Qatar? I think it was Qatar, is the place where they established this huge complex, this medical complex for child amputees. So from Gaza, and so like hundreds or even thousands of children with missing limbs from Gaza have been relocated to there in Qatar, in this huge complex. Qatar put up God knows how many millions of dollars to do this thing. There's a BBC documentary, there's a CNN documentary about it. And by the way, yeah, Israel has taken the limbs of that many children. But, and so I think there's plenty of capacity in the Arab kingdoms, the oil kingdoms, to do this. And again, what's the price that most Palestinians, but he needs to get all of Palestinians in Gaza to do this. What's the price? It has been said that everyone has a price. I don't think even that's true, because again, many people, and here's the point, are simply ideological. And we know this. Not most people, but many people in history have been motivated entirely by their ideology against their own economic interests. We know this. Every monk, right? Every lifelong political activist, the founding fathers of the United States, right? They didn't need to do that. They were very wealthy slave owners and merchants. They didn't need to put their lives on the line and lead a war for independence. They were doing great. Many, many, many people, the communists all over the world, all the communist movements all over the world, you know, many of them did not think it was in their material interest, and many of them died for that, for the ideology. Christian crusaders, evangelists, missionaries, all the missionaries who have gone all over the world over centuries, clearly were not motivated by anything other than their religious or ideological ideas. This needs to be taken into account. Take people seriously when they say what they believe in and why they are doing what they are doing.
So did you notice the bearded hermaphrodites dancing in bikinis on the beach?
What level of trolling is that?
I think it's just a quickly made AI video. I'm pretty certain that wasn't in the prompt, and that AI just, when AI thinks of the Middle East, it thinks of bearded men and it thinks of belly dancers, and it just combined those two things together real quick in that image, and Trump didn't care to correct it before hitting post. You know, it looked good enough to him on that first draft. So, I will say that cavalier attitude.
Yeah, and I will say the belly dancer scene with Trump dancing with the belly dancer, I guess a Palestinian,
the non-hermaphrodite.
Definitely not. Definitely a woman. I like that scene. That was good. That was good.
I think it's important to think about who the intended audience for this might be. One, it's probably to
God.
I mean,
yeah. Who? Right.
Yeah.
Great question. Who? Like trolls like you, alt-right trolls on Twitter.
No,
for sure.
No, I don't think it's, again, I don't like using the term alt-right either, because it's a term invented by a federal agent, Richard Spencer, who worked for the Obama campaign. It's a term that has only had usefulness for the establishment media. It's not a term that has actually defined any dissident right thought.
Damn. You need to get some security hired.
Oh my goodness.
Bloomington, Indiana.
What will I do? What will I do?
Oh my God.
But no, it's not intended for dissident right trolls, in as much as some of them might find it entertaining, and it might be to trigger the left a little bit, but I don't think the left is actually going to go on Truth Social or even understand this to the point to get angry about it, except that they see Elon Musk's face, which isn't triggering enough at this point. But I think this has a Middle Eastern audience in mind. I think this is for the Saudi princes. I think this is for international business. This looks like AI generated Facebook slop that you would see over there. Yeah. And
well, what's the message intended for the Arab states?
Invest in Trump's project, trust Trump's vision diplomatically. Those cities that you love to build in your own countries, we can do that again with this new land that was just leveled.
Damn.
And you know what? Trump and Netanyahu are going to be, you may not like Netanyahu, but you're going to love reclining in a hotel pool next to him. You know? Yeah.
Eating hummus with my nigga Elon.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, it's Weimer time. Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Yeah.
No, yeah, you're right. Trump clearly loves to wield threats, right? And also wield promises.
The carrot and the stick. Yeah.
There you go. Art of the deal.
Uh-huh.
I really do think we need to do a course on the art of the deal.
Yeah. And also, liberals, they don't understand how much Trump appeals, and Trumpism and the vision of Trump appeals to people outside of the United States. That there is a large portion of the world that saw Obama and Biden and the Democratic Party as weak and evil, and see Trump as a strong man, easy to talk to, easy to do business with, somebody who wants peace and prosperity for all, and who represents the wealth of America that people immigrate to America for, to participate in. That immigrants love the idea of Donald Trump, and the old world loves the idea of a strong man. And you know, Western liberals don't understand that much of the world outside of Western Europe is still the old world and still has strong men and has old patriarchal ideas about their culture.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
Damn. Preach.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Whoa. That's an incredible geopolitical analysis that I have not heard, which it unites the immigrant class, I guess you could say, meaning those people in other countries, largely the global South, who want to emigrate to the United States. With the sort of cultural conservatives of the West.
And you know who's big you know who's big in the Middle East? Andrew Tate is big in the Middle East. Elon Musk is big in the Middle East. WWE is big in the Middle East.
Word.
Yeah.
So is Beyonce.
Yeah. The Muslim world, there's a part of it
that loves.
Yes, but I was gonna say fast cars, big muscles, old school masculine. It might be, cartoonish masculine values, action movies.
When I said ass, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
No, really. I mean, God, no, dude, no, it's true, because of course, as our great friend Alexander Dugin keeps saying, right, that the war in Gaza is actually a war between what? Modernity and tradition. That the world right now is roughly divided between the forces of modernity and the forces of tradition. Modernity, which also includes the LGBTQ agenda, sexual freedom, at least as we define it, etc., right? Individualism, the idea that one's individual desires are important, as opposed to the community's interests, right? That's the West versus, and I'm not sure I completely buy into this, but there's a lot here that he's right about, versus the collectivism, the communalism of the East, the attachment to tradition, traditional norms, traditional cultures, right? Like in Gaza, like an Islamic State, like a place where Sharia law is mostly supported, right? Like most of the Middle East. Gosh.
Well, specifically the wealthy areas of the Middle East, like, UAE, Saudi, the places that could fund this project. And,
right.
Yeah.
Man. the forces of tradition versus the forces of modernity. You're right. And the immigrants to this country are largely from places and carry the culture of anti-modernity. They're not. And so, like, this is why MAGA needs to understand that they are much closer to Hamas ideologically, right, than they are to Israel. Of course, much closer. Sharia law is much closer, at least, of course, we talked about this. MAGA is mostly like polyamorous drug addicts. But the game they talk is family values, Christian conservatism, man, woman, family, children, picket fence, all that nonsense. But they really, that's what they put forward first and foremost. Guys, that is really close to Sharia law. Look at Israel. Go to Tel Aviv and just walk around the main streets in Tel Aviv, the main commercial drags in Tel Aviv. It's like trannies and drag bars and gay clubs and sex clubs and porn, and it's really, really nasty, which is the only thing I have to say good about Israel. But for you all MAGA people who think that you're supposed to support Israel because they kill Muslims at a higher clip or something, go look at this place you're supporting. I'm telling you, you're not into it. You're not going to be into it. And that is where Palestinian freedom begins. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry to say, I think that's true. I realize this, that like strategically, tactically, unfortunately, I don't see any other way for the Palestinians to be liberated than for MAGA to understand that Israel is gay. I mean it. And thereby, and
that is I've been calling Israel gay with as loud of a microphone.
No, they're proud of
it.
They're proud of it. They talk about it all the time, right? Mm-hmm. This is one of their main selling points: is that we're pro-gay, and Hamas in Gaza, they'll kill you if you're gay.
Yeah, the Con Inc. rebuttal to the left is, queers for Palestine is an oxymoron.
Right.
That's the Con Inc. rebuttal.
Yeah. No, listen. I've heard there's so much evidence that Tel Aviv is probably the most sexually permissive city on earth. Mm-hmm. Like there's just a lot of fuckery going on there, which again, God bless. And, it's one reason, maybe the only reason I want to be an Israeli. And I really mean that. But I just want also MAGA to know that's who you're into. That's who you think you should have undying loyalty to. So they're going to find out. I promise you that that their money is going to butt fuckery. And when they do that, the Palestinians will be free. And I'm super sorry. That's why Palestinian liberation will be delivered for that reason. But I really mean this because this is how stupid Americans are.
Well, yeah. The establishment conservative wants to bring Sharia law to Los Angeles and wants to bring Palm Beach to the Holy Land.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Another form of globalism.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So I
6 minutes, man. Yeah. What's left, dude? Let's do the news.
Well,
let's be responsible. Oh, yeah. Nazis in Germany.
Yeah. Congratulations. I don't think we have enough time to talk about that other than just acknowledge that they had a historic victory and the firewall.
Weimar. AfD. Come on,
Weimar. Again, my ancestors moved to this part of the country and pretended not to be German for the first few decades they were here.
That's what you've all said.
And then
we've heard this before.
Yeah, and then
Weimar.
Yeah.
No, quickly. Come on. AfD, alternative for Germany. This, it's called far right nationalist populist party in Germany. Went from about 14% in the last election to 20% in this election. And if you look at the map, and I encourage everyone to look at the electoral map of Germany from the last election to the current election, you will see the AfD went from being a marginal party that I think controlled just a handful of districts or maybe none at all to controlling every single district in all of Eastern Germany except for Berlin. That's what just happened.
Wow.
Go look at the map. Every single district in all of Eastern, meaning the portion that the Soviet Union controlled, right? What was East Germany, every district except Berlin, the city, every single district is controlled now by the AfD. And that's a fascinating question, long discussion to be had, and I'm not the person to talk about that, but that's amazing things. But they now, meaning that this party, AfD, represents roughly 1/5, at least, of the German electorate. Now, here's the thing, man. I'm waiting, I'm looking, I'm searching, I'm listening constantly to something that the AfD will say that is in any way Nazi. They are opposed to the relatively unregulated immigration regime in Germany. They want to restrict immigration quite radically. Okay, this is something that, yes, they share with Nazis. Yes, the Nazis wanted radical immigration restriction for sure. Okay. But that also means they share that with just about every other political party on planet Earth. And then the other major sort of suite of policy proposals they have to do with the European Union and NATO and the United States. The relationship between Germany and basically the United States and what their position is. And this is why they've been targeted. And this is why they've been censored. And this is why there's so much freak out and hysteria among American and Western elites right now about them, is that they want Germany to leave NATO. They don't want Germany to anymore be a part of the American empire, to be the leading edge of the American empire in Europe. They don't want to fight Russia. They don't want to intimidate Russia. They don't want to have bases and missiles and regiments inside Germany along the Russian border or near the Russian border. They don't want to do that anymore. They want to cooperate with and, God forbid, trade with Russia, which weirdly, Russia, the Putin government, has always wanted to do with the West. Always wanted to trade. Always wanted to cooperate. Always wanted to share military assets, intelligence assets, and mostly just trade. Do you know that right now there is a warehouse in New Jersey that contains 100,000 bottles of Stolichny vodka right now because of the sanctions that were imposed on Russia by the US after the Ukraine war began? Those bottles of vodka were deemed to be by the federal government to be illicit. And so they're being just stopped. They were seized by the owners of Stolichny on their way to the US, and they're just being held, and still to this day, right now, there's 100,000 bottles of that amazing vodka in a warehouse in New Jersey because of this stuff. Meaning, again, Russia wants to trade with us, sell us vodka, sell us other things, fantastic porn stars. They have lots to offer. And they have zero interest in attacking the United States of America in any way that would ever affect Americans. Putin and Russia offer zero threat to any of us. None. There is no reason for any American to care about Putin or Russia at all. There is no reason for any American to ever support any kind of action, sanction, military intervention against Russia at all. They want to trade with us and sell us vodka. They don't want to invade us. They are incapable of invading us. This is pure insanity that will only lead to nuclear war. The exchange of intercontinental ballistic missiles with nuclear-tipped warheads. That's the only thing this could lead to. Everybody should go buy some Stoli right now. Stoli screwdriver is awesome, by the way. Some orange juice. And just praise, the Russian porn industry, which has been a tremendous boon to the world. And we will have peace. And this comes from the bottom of my heart. I really mean this. The interchange of pleasure and desire and freedom and luxury, meaning economic trade, has always been there to trump the competition between nation states and the military competition between them. And if we simply let people love each other and lust for each other and lust for the things that they have across borders, I promise you, there will be no war, no need for war. And with that, I say goodnight.
I would just offer, maybe start with Dostoevsky, a game of chess,
Yes.
and some Shostakovich. That's the
right.
kind of yeah.
How about Mikhail Baryshnikov?
Yeah.
Dancing, the greatest dancer of all time. Period. No stop. Like, that's it. Go watch some video of Mikhail Baryshnikov in his prime. But it goes Russian culture. Are you kidding me? Dostoevsky, Tolstoy. It goes on and on and on. I mean, I studied Russian culture and history and literature for a solid year when I was at the London School of Economics, and I took a trip to Russia, Soviet Union at the time in 1987. Oh my God, it's one of the principal seats of Western civilization. There's no doubt, always bridging or straddling East and West. Russia, nonetheless, has clearly contributed much of what we think about, how we think about in the West.
Yeah. It's always been in crisis. It's always been at war with modernism and traditionalism for like 800 years.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And there's never been any interest in conquering us. None. Zero.
Mm-hmm.
Never. During Peter, during Catherine, none of it. During the Alexanders, the Ivans, none of it. Even during the Bolsheviks, they didn't really want to conquer us. They were interested in cooperating with the United States because they knew they couldn't conquer us. So all the saboteurs, the spies that they sent in the Soviet Union sent to the U.S. in the 40s and 50s and 60s, like the Rosenbergs, yeah, they were spies and saboteurs to an extent, but their whole mission was to build a cooperation, an alliance between the liberal Democratic Party in the United States and the Soviet Union. Yeah, that's what the CPUSA was always trying to do. They knew they couldn't conquer the United States in any way meaningful. And so that was their mission. Am I an anti-communist? 100%. Was there a need for the Red Scare and the Cold War and all the repression and warfare and killing across the globe to stop communism? No. Okay.
Before we go to the after show, I do want to say great job on the first Bible lecture last night. Some of the best work in the Academy coming out right now. And
coming from you, that means a lot.
It's really hard to do all of Genesis in one night. It's really hard. And I mean, you just go through it and you ask whatever question. It was the humility that I really appreciated, is that you're just like, this makes no sense to me. What's going on here? And then it was a great Socratic exposition for the members of the Academy to discuss. Very, very fruitful session here happening.
Yeah.
Ongoing. We got 3 more sessions of the Bible right now at Unregistered Academy. So yeah.
Check it out, everybody. And tomorrow on Unregistered Live, when I present portions of what we're doing at the Academy, I'm not sure what I'll be talking about, but I have a feeling it will involve the Bible because it is so central. And because, the class last night was really amazing. And we had tremendous participation by Academy members. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say before we go is I noticed, and this is my fault, that a lot of people have wanted to know how to participate in Unregistered, the after show after this. support this show and be a member of the Academy and take all the courses, and we never mentioned this, but if you go to patreon.com/unregistered, and this is actually the most popular membership in the last couple of months. A lot of people have signed up for this without us even mentioning it. If you want to support this show, Unreported, have access to the after show and be able to take all the courses at the Unregistered Academy, just become a patron at the Unregistered Academy level, which, as I said, many people have done recently to my amazement, because we haven't talked about it. Yeah, it's there. Patreon.com/unregistered. If you sign up at the highest level, you'll have access to everything I and we do. So I recommend that. Michael, amazing conversation. Thank you, dude.
Sweet.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, so the after show. Yeah. So we're going to go right after every Unreported. Michael and I hang out in the after show. It's a Zoom meeting. It's totally informal. You can just be anonymous. You don't have to show your face or your name. We don't have to know you're there. Or you can come and yell and talk to us and show your face and all the rest of it. We've been doing this for like 6 or 7 years now. It's the highlight of my week. Every Wednesday after Unreported, we hang out in Zoom, but it's only for patrons. Yeah, go to patreon.com/unregistered and join our community. Okay, my brother. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. Peace. Gonna be at the after
You rock.
show.
Peace.
After the party is the after party.